I'm an addict. My name's Ivan.
Hi, Ivan.
Actually, what I'd like to do is maybe do a little history of outreach, and this is from my perspective, which is maybe different than from others. Having been on the H&I committee for, trying to think yesterday for how long, but it's been 6 or 7 years, I think, and there kept on coming to the H&I committee issues about what do we do about these meetings, and then of course they were in H&I settings, but they weren't H&I meetings because there wasn't anybody from the outside coming into the meetings. There wasn't any contact with the H&I committee, and the H&I committee was not willing to take responsibility for meetings that they had no contact with. So the response was, I don't know we don't know what you're going to do with those meetings. They're not H&I meetings, and somebody else needs to deal with them. It's the area's responsibility. It's the region's responsibility to deal with them. And it just kept on coming back and coming back and coming back. So finally, a few years ago, we said, okay, if everybody else is saying, what are we going to do about these meetings, and we keep on saying they're not our meetings, they keep on coming back, that we need to take a stand, and we need to, obviously, it is in our purview to deal with this, take a look at it, and get it to where it belongs if it doesn't belong here. So we went to the conference, and we talked about these isolated meetings mostly in jails and prisons, and what are we going to do about them. And of course our sights are a little bit narrow, being H&I, and that's what we do. And when we discussed this openly with other members of the fellowship, they said, yeah, and what about the meetings that are isolated geographically, that there's no other meetings around for 200 miles? What about the meetings that are isolated by language, that they happen to speak a different language than they do in other areas? I mean, could be right in the middle of a large metropolitan area. And so what was started from there was the isolated ad-hoc. And an ad-hoc was formed to deal with all isolated meetings, not just those in H&I. And I believe that this outreach committee is a stem from where the isolated groups ad-hoc was at. Mm-hmm. And so now we're looking at defining it a little bit more and being a little bit more specific in dealing with those different types of meetings. I know that the H&I committee is extremely supportive of the outreach committee because this is where we think those types of meetings belong. And we may have jumped the gun a little bit in suggesting that outreach become a standing committee this year, but we certainly will support that next year or whenever the outreach committee feels that they're ready to become a standing committee. I think that there is a certain percentage of the fellowship that already has area and regional outreach, and if it's already happening within the fellowship, maybe we need to look at it on a worldwide basis. Mm-hmm. Some other stuff has come to my attention very recently, and I haven't asked around enough as to where it belongs, and it may belong in outreach. We had or at least maybe start from outreach anyway, we had an addict who was supposed to share here tonight at this conference from another country who wasn't able to get into this country because he's an addict. And I know that there are a couple of members from Canada who, in order to be able to come into this country, have to be a little less than honest. Because if you're an addict, they don't want you in this country, and they don't distinguish between being recovering and not recovering. So I don't know if that's an outreach effort or not, but it's something that I think we need to look at as a fellowship. I should be off base there. In any case, World Service H&I has an ad hoc specifically geared to outreach, and Marianne is here, and I'm sure she's going to talk about that a little bit. She's the chair for that committee. What we see is the H&I Outreach Committee is doing the work that needs to be done in regards to the specific types of isolated meetings in hospitals and institutions, and do as much of the work as we possibly can in being real specific on how to get these meetings to be a part of our service structure, and then hand that material over to the Outreach Committee and let them continue to define it and finalize it for fellowship approval. I guess this is kind of, for me, is kind of a pipe dream. and we're actually heading in that direction. I had the privilege to be able to carry a meeting into the maximum men's penitentiary in the state of Ohio, which was about 65, 70 miles from where I lived, and I did it every other week for about 6 years. And I guess I became a little bit emotionally involved with the meeting and with the men at the meeting. I don't think that you cannot and be an addict, I guess. And they were wanting more. They were into it. We'd ask for a topic. They'd want to say, we want to talk about the second tradition, you know. And I think this is great. You know, this is great stuff. They started a STEP meeting. Every penitentiary in the state of Ohio has a substance abuse coordinator, so they do some treatment-oriented stuff. But these particular group of guys that were coming to the NA meeting wanted to have their own STEP meeting, and they started their own STEP meeting, and what sprung from that was some sponsorship. The guys that were learning, that were around a little bit longer, were starting to sponsor some of the other guys and tried to come in as much as I could for that. And what they were saying was, this H&I meeting and this other meeting that we had, they're great, they're wonderful, but it's not enough. We need more. So the thought came around that there happens to be 9 cell blocks in Lucasville Penitentiary. Now, Lucasville is located in the Ohio River Valley area, where the area is the same size as the whole Buckeye region, which is the northern part of the state. A lot of isolated meetings. And we had, I don't know at the time, maybe 9 to 12 meetings going in this area. And here's 9 cell blocks in this one penitentiary. And if each cell block was to have a meeting in their cell block per week, that would give them 9 meetings. And why wouldn't it be possible for each one of these 9 meetings to have a GSR, and for them once a month to meet within the facility and make their own area, and actually be an area of Narcotics Anonymous? And that was, like I say, that's a pipe dream, and maybe we're heading in that direction. But the thought is that we have members of this fellowship who are incarcerated. They're within boundaries as they would be if they were living in Australia or another country even. And although in this country, if you're a convicted felon, of course you're not allowed to carry firearms. We don't do that anyway in this fellowship. But you're not allowed to vote. You know, you're not allowed to have a say-so in what happens. And that we do not feel that way in this fellowship. That everybody in this fellowship is equal. And what's happening is that the members that we have who are incarcerated are not getting the full range of services available, or the full range of recovery that's available. There's very little sponsorship going on. There's very little opportunity to be a trusted servant, which I know is a big part of my own personal recovery. So how do we link these individuals of our fellowship up directly to the service structure so that all the avenues of recovery are available to them? And that's what we see as the goal of outreach, is to have it so that can occur. We were talking a little bit last night about some of the things that are already going on in the fellowship. There's a prison up in Mansfield that has an ARNA camp, and so there's a little less restriction for those members that are in the ARNA camp, and they have their own meeting, and it's a regular NA meeting, and they have a GSR, but the GSR cannot get out to the area meeting. So every 3 months, the area meeting meets in this facility and has their area meeting so that the members can participate, and that's like great stuff, you know. What's going to work in one place is not going to work in another. So rather than to come up and say, this is the way you get involved in the service structure, this is the way you have sponsorship, this is the way you do it, we're going to have to come up with as many different possibilities and choices as possible, which is, I think, what recovery is all about, is having choices. So I think we're fairly well into the process of doing that. It's new. We need lots more ideas. We need lots of support from the fellowship on what's working, what's going on where, and how that's happening. And there's lots of stories like that. Sponsorship is certainly one thing that is not done in H&I. We do not sponsor. If I go into a facility and I sponsor one individual, then I have to sponsor every single person that asks me to sponsor them. I can't treat one person different than the other. But just because I'm involved in H&I and I don't feel that if I'm bringing a message into a meeting, I can't sponsor somebody, that somehow we can't find a way for individuals in that facility to be able to be sponsored. One idea that we had come up with was that if one person would go in not a part of H&I, but a member of NA would go in and sponsor 3 individuals, or let's say 3 people would go in and sponsor 3 individuals. So right now, nine individuals are being sponsored. And after they work through the 5th step, they're told, now you can begin to sponsor 3 other people as you can continue to work the steps. So now those 9 people are sponsoring 3 other people. Now there's 27 people being sponsored on top of the 9, so that's 36. And then once they get past the 5th step, then those 27 people are sponsoring 3 more, and so now we're down into the hundreds, and then eventually there's a sponsorship program going in this facility without there having to be a lot of contact from the outside coming in. There's also sponsorship through mail. Another thing that H&I doesn't do is we don't do jail mail. Well, if we don't do it, who does? Maybe that's a part of what needs to happen in outreach. In looking around to see how it's done and how it works in other places, it may be in one state that they're not okay with that type of contact. But what's wrong with members in the state of Pennsylvania writing and doing sponsorship through the mail with members who are incarcerated in Texas and do it in completely different states? I don't know if that's necessary, but that was one of the ideas that have come up. So a lot of things are happening. I'm really excited about it. It's something that I have thought about for a very long time, and now I see it actually starting to materialize. It's starting to happen. So I'm real big on the outreach concept, and I think when we talk about what is our primary purpose, at this particular point, I can't think of anything else, at least for me, that's more important than outreach. And thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Guy.